is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Gravity Falls, Season 2, Episode 13, Dungeons, Dungeons, and More Dungeons. In this episode, it was impressed upon me how much more fun it would be to watch this episode with Owen. And now I understand why you all insisted on that. It was. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Melanie for commissioning this episode. You guys, this episode it's a very unexpected episode because of how close we are to the end of not just the season, but the entire show. And I am not expecting that at this point, now that we've got Great Uncle Ford, that's what he says, Grunkle Stan and Great Uncle Ford. Now that we've got Great Uncle Ford living with us in the house, and, you know, they are all kind of like going about their lives as normally as they can, I really thought this was going to begin the acceleration of the main storyline. And it is, I hesitate to call this a filler episode because I don't like that term unless we're talking about a show that has like 40 episodes per season and clearly somebody is just trying to fill time. But I mean that this is a Monster of the Week episode instead of having to do with the main through line. And I really thought we weren't going to get any more of these now. But I'm not against it because these tend to be even more fun than the main storyline. That is true of many shows of this nature, you know. Owen and I are covering Avatar: The Last Airbender, and we have noticed that anything that has to do with like the getting into the Fire Nation and defeating the Fire Lord, all of those episodes tend to be the weakest out of the series. And the ones that are just the gang traveling and running into, you know, weird creatures or strange problems are the ones that we enjoy the most, because that is when characters get a chance to flex and really like be themselves and tackle problems in character. Whereas main storyline stuff, often they are forced to do things in order to further the plot rather than letting themselves, rather than the writers being allowed to let them act up because of who they are. That said, I'm really glad that we haven't left all of this behind. I'm really glad that the second half of this season isn't going to be just a headlong, sprint into whatever the rift situation is. I forget exactly what it is he calls it, because, at the end of this episode, Ford shows Dipper this, like, what I keep wanting to call a pocket dimension, because it's literally like in a ball that fits in his pocket. But it is obviously something that's hugely dangerous. He tells Dipper, and he really wants to ensure that Dipper does not tell his uncle or his sister. And I like and hate this, mostly because Ford telling him when he isn't allowed to tell anybody else is meant to be a mark of respect, a mark of closeness that Dipper has obviously been sort of longing for. Dipper wants to feel like he is connected to Ford in a way that is more than just by accident, by blood, and he's been looking for that all episode, and he finally gets it with this gesture. But on the other hand, I don't really see why Ford told him, really. I mean, one could say Ford wanted to, give Dipper some respect and some closeness. And maybe, but there's something about Ford that makes me feel like that's not at the top of his list of priorities. You know, but he does say that he thinks maybe him and Dipper connected over this thing because they each have not had a friend in a while. So I guess that's possible. It just he doesn't feel that way to me. But I'm getting way ahead of myself because that's like the literal last thing that happens this episode. So let's start things off from the top. We get the usual, first we get to see that the Mystery Shack is absolutely trashed, and it's got a sign in front of it that says closed for repairs. And we have this lazy Tuesday that everybody is supposedly engaging in. Mabel says that she has eaten an entire bag of cheese doodles without even using her hands. And Grunkle Stan says it's really nice to have a day where nothing interesting happens whatsoever. And just as he says this, his brother comes crashing through the door with his weird power gloves and a one-eyed octopus wrapped around his arm. And he yells for them all to get out of the way and don't let it get a taste for human flesh. And it's just this big chase that, you know, ends in this thing being sort of, I don't want to say burned to a crisp because it is alive later, but I thought it was dead from the way that went down. I am so, oh my God. Before I started recording, guys, I mentioned to the people in the audience, Austin and Tan, that the Disney Plus player is extremely annoying. And I had forgotten that just in terms of using it as a regular person, it's bad enough. But I try to record while I have the episode playing in another tab, and I will jump into the tab occasionally to get a closer look at something that I want to talk about, to pause and like investigate a frame. And Disney Plus does not let me like pause and start up again without there being like weird jumps, or if I use my space bar, which I can use on every other site, it will simply close it and go back to like the main menu for Gravity Falls. Oh, I hate them. So I'm a sorry ahead of time if there's like the weird pauses while I'm like, hold on, because I'm occasionally going to forget and use that fucking space bar that I can literally use on every other site. So this is like, you know, exactly Dipper's shit that he wants to get in on. He's got the fucking author running around like chasing this weird creature that he has overpowered with his wild tools and his power gloves, and is about to take the thing down into his weird workshop in the basement. This is everything Dipper has ever wanted. But when he goes up to Ford and is like, hey, can I come down with you and like find out about what's going on here? Oh, I just did it again. I just pressed the space bar and now it's gone. He tells him that this is all too weird for Dipper to be involved in, and slams the secret door in Dipper's face. And it's just, you know, it's kind of precious in a way because this guy really underestimates what Dipper has been involved with. Like him saying this is too weird for you. I'm just like, man, you have not been listening, have you? And Dipper winds up by accident falling into a situation where he has something that is exactly what he needs to try and get close to Ford. Anyway, we will get back to that. But in the meantime, Mabel is talking to Dipper about not taking it so hard that he's not getting the attention that he wants from Ford. And his Grunkle Stan says that he should take it hard, and says, my brother is a dangerous know-it-all, and the stuff he's messing with is even worse. Do yourself a favor and stay away from him. You hear me? And understandably, Dipper is like, dude, come on. You know exactly what I have been going through in this house over this summer. Everything about what you are saying to stay away from is what we have had no choice but to engage with this entire time. I, of course appreciate Grunkle Stan's position on this. He is resentful of his brother at this point, a little bit jealous, I think, not just of his brother being successful and intelligent, but I think he like there's a part of him that wishes that Dipper was as excited to talk to him as he's been to talk about his brother. And it's just like, this guy's living right in your basement. It's not like Dipper gets all this time to sort of get the guy off his mind. He's living right there, walking through your house with wild creatures. Like, yeah, of course he wants to participate in this. Come on. Meanwhile, Mabel is really excited that the season finale of Duck-tective is on Friday. That's all the mystery you need this week. And she says, quack with us, Dipper. And she and Grunkle Stan begin to quack. And Dipper is completely uninterested, watching the entrance to the underground lair. And they quack for like a full minute in the background. It's actually a pretty good joke. It's one of those jokes that goes on long enough that it becomes funny after it stopped being funny for a second. So we have the reminder on the news of everything that happened with the gravity being turned off and everything sort of like flipping upside down and getting damaged. And I really I forgot about Mayor Befufflefumpter, but he's super duper excited for this wrecking ball to like come in and completely trash places while they are standing literally right there. That sounds like a thing that he would definitely be into. Mabel, for her part, is writing a letter to her parents with a full illustration of Grunkle Stan and Great Uncle Ford that honestly it depicts them both in total fairness, I think. And I wonder what the hell her parents are going to make of this development, because I can't imagine they believe a word she says. But, at this point, Dipper comes in and he is super excited because when he was at the store, he found a huge box for the game Dungeons, Dungeons, and More Dungeons. It's a wonderful, wonderful joke that just keeps on giving. Obviously, the people who wrote this episode have a great affection for Dungeons and Dragons, but also can step back and look at how ridiculous it can be and how just like impenetrable it feels for somebody who is coming into it new. I adore the part where Grunkle Stan comes in and says, "Oh, hey, is that the game that is nothing like the picture on the box?" And I got to tell you guys, when I was young and I didn't know how D&D was played, I 1,000% assumed that you got to like illustrate, like that you made illustrations of your characters and that was somehow incorporated into the game, that you made models. And like, I know now that there are people who do illustrate their characters. There are people who do make figurines of their characters or paint, minis that are as close to their character as they can find. But I thought that came standard with a game. I didn't realize that's all optional shit that you do if you're really into it, but is not necessary. And the first time I ever played was when I was with Brendan in Philadelphia. And I could not believe how boring it was. Now, I want to preface this, guys, with I know all D&D games are not necessarily like this. My experience, though, has not been great, and it's a combination of factors. One, I'm not super familiar. So everything that I have to do as a character takes longer because I have to be reminded what the steps are. I have to, especially a recent character that I played, like when I moved down here, was a Scion and took like an extra 2 steps to do literally everything. And for a character that is inexperienced, it was just not a good choice. There were, and the other thing is that in the games that I played, there was always someone else who was incredibly not into it, and they would slow the whole thing down by a lot. And I would get really, really frustrated because once we finally started to get into a rhythm and I would start to see the appeal of the game, this person would bring everything to a grinding halt. And it was just, excruciating sometimes. There was a game that lasted like 6 hours once, like here in Texas. And by the end of it, I literally quit. I was just like that. It just went on so long and so little happened in the space of this interminable game that I really could not be asked. By the end of it, I was just like, this is not for me. And again, I know that it doesn't have to be this way. You know, the actual play RPG podcasts out there that are popular, obviously they're edited so that things move along a lot more quickly a lot of the time. But if you are working with people who are experienced, who are playing the same character and have been for a long time, who are playing the same edition for a long time, that's another thing. They bring up the editions in this episode that are, you know, all have like characters that maybe aren't allowed in other sections, or they have like movements that aren't allowed. If you are really familiar and playing with other people that you know well, all of you know your characters well, and you are given that time, I feel like that is when you really get what you like, get the most out of the game. But for a lot of people, the playing itself seems to be very secondary to the creation of new characters. They are more excited about making somebody brand new because they got bored with their old character. And then they have to readjust all of their play, like their impulses when they play, because this is somebody that they're not super familiar with, whose stats they don't know by heart, whose abilities they haven't used before. And that is the thing that I get frustrated by, is like nobody that I have played with has really had the desire to sort of like really get to know a character and play them out. It's always been like, well, I'm kind of bored with them, so would you mind killing them off and I'll become somebody else and join your party now. So anyway, all of this, I just wanted to give you guys some background on like what I experienced with Dungeons and Dragons and like how I feel about it, because I can really understand in general the appeal. It's a great method for people to practice like improvisational like skills, whether that be just with dialogue or whether that be with comedy, depending on like the type of tone that you've got. And it can be hugely imaginative and just a lot of fun, but it requires a kind of commitment that is difficult to find in most players my age, I will say. I feel like I am at an age where people are really starting to like put down roots with family, and several of my friends have had kids within the past year, and nobody is really able to commit the time and the concentration, the focus that I feel like you need to in order for this sort of game to be particularly successful. And there also needs to be a kind of energy to it. And when people treat it like a regular board game and sort of just sit and watch until it's their turn, and then they roll a dice and they're like, I decided to climb the tree. It's just soups boring. You have to bring something more to it. So it's just I am always bummed out that I haven't had a better experience, because I feel like this is something that I could potentially get pretty into, but I have not had good luck with the chemistry with other people. And the games that I have played, like I said, I quit one, I moved away on another, and it's just been not awesome. There are so many running jokes this episode about how extra the game is. And I love in particular Mabel's assessment. This is like homework, the game. Girl, you don't even know how correct you are. We get to see a little bit of it later when Dipper is in his room with her and he's like creating a dungeon, and she's like, aren't you going to go to sleep? And he's like, I really want to get this done. Uncle Ford is going to be so surprised. And this is like, Owen had been running a campaign recently in the Star Wars universe and had to take all of this time every night to like prepare the story. And I know that's a part of it, but it is homework. And it doesn't look like a fun, I'm setting up a game thing he's pouring through books and researching things on websites and assembling a bunch of notes. And yeah, I know what that is. And I understand how this works, but it does look so incredibly boring from the outside. And what I'm saying, in summary, I want so much to like Dungeons and Dragons. I really want to, but it has not happened for me. And I don't care enough to keep making the effort. Does that make sense? There comes a point where you're like, I've given this a couple tries, and if it takes this much energy and I am still not really seeing it, then I kind of feel like I'm going to just leave it alone. Melanie is here. Yay. Hi, Melanie. So that is the beginning of this reveal that he's playing Dungeons, and more Dungeons is already just so great because of the joke of the name itself, the way everybody else perceives the game. And he pulls out graph paper, and the way that he tells Mabel how the game works. Guys, it's so perfectly done. She looks at the box. She's like, well, maybe if that hot elf is involved, I can get into this game. Tell me how it works. And poor Dipper not understanding the way that people are who are not like him. He launches into, the rules are simple. First, you roll a 38-sided die to determine the level of each player's statistical analysis power orb. These orbs relate directly to the amount of power that your team has dominion over, which is inverse to the quadrants in your quadrant satchel. As he's saying all of this, her face begins to get more and more closed and suspicious. She interrupts to say, and then we ride unicorns? And he says, yes. And she gets excited. And then he says, and no. First, we make a graph. And he pulls out graph paper. And I particularly love Grenda turning up later and saying, oh my God, graph paper, kill it, as she stomps on it. You know what, Grenda? The more I get to know you, the more I like you. That is a fair response to graph paper, in my opinion. And Seuss shows up, and Mabel tries to sort of pawn Dipper off on Seuss and be like, well, if you need two people to play, here's your guy. And Seuss, it turns out, is into his own thing, which is basically another LARPing. I don't go in for that pen and paper kind of stuff. I'm more of a FC LARPer. Foam and cardboard, legitimate outdoor role-playing. It's where passionate brethren of craftsmen bring their dreams to magical reality. And then we cut to a truly saddening little tableau of him and the two cops and what's the name of the little guy with the mustache? All wearing cardboard armor and brandishing weapons that are covered in foam and duct tape. Y'all, look. There just comes a point where it's embarrassing. I'm not trying to be this kind of judgmental rain on parade type of shit. If people want to do the thing, then by all means. You're not hurting anybody, go ahead. But Lord have mercy, it is a really difficult thing to look at. It is. It just is. This is it's a weird, especially for me, I worked at a run fair for a little while. And I am nobody to point fingers and laugh about being in costumes and using certain voices and accents to play a character. But when it's this sort of thing, it just feels different. It just feels different. Oh man, this is rough. Anyway, that's what he does. And so he is not interested in playing this with Dipper. And this is when Grunkle Stan comes in and say, is this that game that's mostly math and writing and isn't anything like the picture on the box? Yes, it is. Oh, I love how much Dipper is just 100% aware of what the game really is, and just does not apologize for that at all. That is the part that he likes. There's no reason to be sad about it. So he winds up like going outside trying to play the game with the goat because nobody will play with him, and the goat tries to eat his dice. And when he pulls the dice away from the goat, it goes under the house, and he follows it. Oh my God, guys, I just realized there's something written on the wall under the house, like by the foundation. Hold on, I gotta pause this and see. It says, Seuss was here. Aw, man, I think I'm stuck. Oh, bless him. So it goes down into the basement and right into the secret lab. He falls in there, and Great Uncle Ford spots the 38-sided die. I keep wanting to say 20-sided. And realizes exactly what it is that he's playing. And this is when they connect. It's pretty good. I love this little Cyclops octopus, by the way. I really like it. It reminds me of the aliens in Futurama, but like a friendly version that doesn't have slobbering teeth and likes to eat people. It's really cute, and I felt sad a little bit when Dipper lands on the ground next to it, and it sort of shrinks away from Great Uncle Ford back into the jar as if it is afraid of him. I recognize that this thing is super dangerous and that I am being fooled by how cute it is because its adorable eye is in fact a mouthful of teeth. But it looks so like afraid of this man who lit it on fire before. And I just was kind of like, oh, look at this little eye. Be nice. Oh my God, guys. I keep accidentally jumping out of it because of fucking Disney Plus. So Dipper and his uncle decide that they are going to play a game together, and this begins to get pretty serious. Meanwhile, upstairs, our friends are all preparing for the season finale of Ducktective, and Mabel has created a food ramp from a tube of paper toweling cut in half lengthwise that is like a trough going right from a box of popcorn into her mouth. And I have to say, that girl is going places. I love everything about when the family decides to be incredibly like lazy and self-indulgent and getting to see what that looks like when you really decide to go for it and embrace it. So everybody is like so excited about this. Even Grunkle Stan has made this horrifying Ducktective like out of a chicken head, a rooster head. I don't know. It's really awful looking, but he's getting in the spirit. He's trying to get excited about the thing. And as they are doing this upstairs, underneath everything, we've got Dipper and his uncle playing the game in their, little lair. I kind of want to call it a lair, even though that implies bad things. And eventually these two decide to move upstairs and take over the entire living room. And guys, I mean, I'm not wrong, right? Firmly Team Grunkle Stan, Maple, and Grenta. Candy's not here, actually, is she? I wonder why not. I wonder why Candy wasn't involved in this episode. But like, they know that these people are looking forward to this finale. There is literally nowhere else that they can watch it because this is where the television is. And these assholes decide to take over the entire living room over my dead body. That is the most inconsiderate shit Grenda stomping on the graph paper is the least of what would have happened if somebody tried to cop attitude with me about this. Get the fuck out of my way. You do not come between me and my television. Thank you very much. So, yeah. There is also a joke that I nearly forgot when Dipper is explaining, because Ford says something about how the wizard looks different than he did in his time. And Dipper says, thankfully, you missed the period where the creators of the game tried to make it cooler. And we see this like really horrific commercial where they try to like hip-hopize the game. And there's like two dudes that are using spray paint to like try and, guys, available wherever dope games are sold. Peace. What I love about this is that whether it's true or not, and I've been told that it was somewhat true by Owen, the 90s were a time of trying to like make things cooler and updated. And that is not to say that nowadays we aren't also doing that, but we try and do that while I think learning from the mistakes of the 90s, where we attempted to like, I feel like we try to recapture now the nostalgia surrounding something that we like, the reasons why we loved it as a kid. And I feel like in the 90s, it was more trying to make something have more mass appeal by making it cooler and therefore more accessible to people who weren't interested in it in the first place. So that was like, we're trying to open up sales and get more people to buy this. And nowadays, revitalizing old stuff is more about the people who used to love this now are grown up and have their own money, and we can capitalize on that. So there's a very different sort of like mindset behind each of those. One of them is attempting to fundamentally change a thing. And another is trying to like resuscitate an old thing. Both of them obviously have their problems, and we know that. But I prefer the resuscitation to like a complete revamp personally. Austin Ashley brought up exactly what I was going to mention next, that this is definitely a thing in the comics world. And Owen will talk a lot about 90s comics and just, you know, the redesigns of character costumes, the change in style of illustration, the choice to put pockets, thousands and thousands of pockets on everything. Weird shit that just is now a hallmark of the dark age of comics, as Austin is saying in the comment. It's the kind of thing that now when you see something that is particularly designed in a garish way, a comparison to a 90s comic is the immediate thing that comes to mind. And I assume that we're going to go through another phase of this again, but the 90s really particularly felt like it indulged in a lot of this. So anyway, I really enjoyed this. So let me get, before they had gone upstairs, Dipper and Ford had this conversation about the infinity-sided die. These things are outlawed in 9,000 dimensions. Want to know why? Look at those symbols. Infinite sides means infinite outcomes. If I rolled it, anything could happen. Our faces could melt into jelly. The world could turn into an egg. Or you could just roll an 8. Who knows? That's why I have to keep it in this protective cheap plastic case, which that joke made me giggle. This is one of those things that he just mentions how it's like this die, but does not mention, like, it's taken for granted when he says this that we understand anything that anything the die says will actually happen in life, rather than it be a dice that you use to play a game. It's a dice that affects the actual world, which to me deserved more of an explanation than just, it's like anything can happen. I don't feel like I totally understood that part of it, you know? I thought that he was talking about our faces could melt into jelly as characters. The world that we're playing in could turn into an egg. I didn't really get that this was like, and granted, why would it be outlawed in 9,000 Galaxies if it doesn't actually affect the world? But it's fine. I'm just going to leave it. So when they get upstairs and I forgot about the part where Dipper says something about how Uncle Ford doesn't make fun of him all the time like Mabel and Grunkle Stan do. And she says something like, give him time. And he gets a really sad look on his face. And she finally goes to bed and says, you got me. And looks like she feels kind of guilty about it. And it's guilty, I think, both because she recognizes that she has been teasing him a lot. And also, she wants to spend time with him, and he's spending all of his time with Ford, which is something that he wanted. But now she's like seeing that it's not just, I was looking forward to spending time with him. I can't believe I got my chance. I'm definitely going to take advantage of this. It's also, I wanted to spend time with him, and also it's been unpleasant with you guys. And that's a different situation. That makes you feel bad, I swear to God, you guys, I just jumped out of the screen again, and I am going to write to Disney Plus and just give them a piece of my mind in a second, because this is just unacceptable. All right. So we have the argument with the taking over of the living room because they need all of this space for their stupid graph paper. And we have a wonderful reference. This happens more than once this episode to Gravity Falls itself. Grunkle Stan is making fun of his brother for playing this stupid game. And his brother says, hey, at least I'm not all keyed up to watch a kid's show. To which Grunkle Stan says, I'll have you know that Duck Detective has a big mystery element and a lot of humor that goes over kids' heads. And Grenda says, I don't get a lot of it, but I like animals in human situation. I enjoyed that. I do really do. Grunkle Stan, it starts in a few minutes, and Stan reaches forward to try and move the graph paper off of the screen, and his brother stops him and says, move that and pay the price. And honestly, guys, I would have thrown this man out the window. I'm just saying, no, and no. Y'all, if you really need all this damn space, go outside. Get yourself a picnic table, pin stuff to trees, whatever you need to do. You can play this literally anywhere. You don't even need specialized equipment other than your precious graph paper and a pen and a dice. So go anywhere. You could even go play in the shop. But they are insisting on playing in the same spot as that. No. And at this point, they get in a little tussle, and Grunkle Stan grabs the bag that his brother is holding, and chucks it, and doesn't realize that there is an infinity-sided dice in the bag that is super dangerous as he throws it across the room. It's great because it's been very carefully pointed out that it's a cheap plastic case. There's no reason to believe that throwing this across the room, that dice is not going to come out and roll around. But it lands on the wizard side. There's a picture, and he's been named before, and I'll get it in a second. But I am unsurprised by the fact that Owen immediately zeroed in on the wizard who appears and realizes that he is voiced by Weird Al. Mortals of Dimension 46 apostrophe / kneel before me and then he rolls a dice and he says, snivel. And I am Probabilitor, the greatest wizard in all mathology, give or take an error of 0.4. And it turns out that this wizard being here, he is going to eat their brains, because that is how he absorbs their intelligence. So that's cool. Austin's in the chat, voiced by Weird Al. I know, Austin. I just said. But yeah, this dude, like, Weird Al is just a national treasure. And him being involved in this show is not surprising at all. He is prime target for this specific nerderific episode too. Like, him being in this show doesn't surprise me. Him being in this episode in particular is so perfect that it's almost in itself a joke. It's very, very good. And I mean, he is giving himself to this weird fucking magician probabilitor role. It is great to watch. He clearly is having such a good time doing this. So, yeah, he's going to eat their brains, and he has to, roll a dice every time he's about to do something, which does help. It's a fun thing to see that, like, he gets slowed down by this. And they wind up getting carried off, Ford and Dipper, through the wall, which just, this poor Mystery Shack has just been fucking put through the ringer, man. He's going to need to knock this whole shit down and start all over again. There's a hole in the wall that you could, like, put the sofa through. And Grenda, for her part, is kind of like, so, you guys want to just hang out and keep playing the game? Are we good with, or keep watching the show? That's what it is. But they have to go and rescue Dipper and Ford, even though the only person who really wants to do this is Mabel. Grunkle Stan, he's kind of like, well, what are you going to do? And Grenda, maybe let him get a couple bites out of Ford's brain first, even things out smartness-wise. So they wind up going on a quest to rescue their family. Epic wizard quest. Everybody grab a weapon. So he goes and reaches behind the couch and gets a baseball bat. Mabel gets a rake. And Grenda brings the armchair as a weapon. And her and Mabel both have, like, trash can lids as shields. It's an interesting choice of weapon. I'm not really entirely sure, but that works. It's fine. So, as they're setting out on their quest, we get to meet some of the other characters that popped into existence along with Probabilitor. He's got this, like, griffin and the hot elf and a huge orc. The orc is just truly gigantic. And the elf is like, reminds me kind of Elliot from Magicians, in that he is bored by everything, always looks great, and just is kind of like, yeah, I'll do it. Fine, I guess. Not because you told me, but I feel like it, so I guess. And he is pretty amusing. I really enjoy him. With the sparkle as he, like, shakes his hair out. It is really something. So we have the orc that stops Grunkle Stan and Mabel and Grenda as they approach. He's the one guard. Oh no, how did they get past my one guard? If ye wish to pass, first ye must complete 7 unworldly quests, each more difficult than the last. And Grenda comes up beside him and just smashes him over the head with the armchair. So that is the answer to my question. What are you planning to do with that, girl? I'm just going to smash people with it. It's very heavy. What do you even... Are you stupid? I'm going to smash with it. Duh. You know what, Grenda? I stand corrected. And Mabel's worried that he's dead. And Grunkle Stan says, he's magic, sweetie. I'm sure he's fine. But then turns and, like, says to Grenda, there are no cops in the woods. We take this to our graves. And Grenda gives him a nod and a wink to let him know, which was maybe one of my favorite jokes. I love Grenda being unexpectedly like kind of cutthroat, you know, because she is so good-hearted and sweet so much at the time. But then you get these like little moments here and there where you're like, ooh, Grenda, yikes. So Dipper and his uncle are tied to this tree as the pot is getting heated up for them to get their brains cooked or their bodies boiled or whatever the hell it is that they're doing. And at this point, the family shows up and tells them that we want our family back and we are here to fight the fuck out of you. And he says, then you have to beat me in a game of Dungeons, and More Dungeons, real life edition. And he says that his characters, he's going to be choosing these orcs, and they are going to play against the characters of Ford and Dipper, who are shrunk down and put onto the board in what I have to admit is the exact sort of fantasy. Like, the board is made to look like the courtyard of a castle. Like, there's turrets at each corner and like arched doorways and pennants and things. This is the kind of thing that I imagined when I heard how this game worked. And I know that there are boards out there that you can, but they're not, you know what I'm saying? And as soon as he pulled this into existence and was like, we're going to play this game, I was like, ooh, because weirdly pulling back and making it into a game again in the show, I think is just a really smart idea for sort of simplifying everything. So this is something that Mabel and Grunkle Stan had been resisting playing earlier. They had not shown any interest in fact, reacted with derision. And now Dipper and Ford's lives depend on this. So now they have to focus and figure out exactly how this is going to work. And the game is a battle royale. We help our characters make spells and decide the course of the battle. If you win, I go back to my own dimension. But if I win, I eat their brains. And Grunkle Stan says that he is down with this. And we get a bit of a reminder that this is kind of right in his and Mabel's wheelhouses. Because as the game starts, they don't know that there's no particular set of movements that they need to abide by. You know, there's not a card that you draw from a stack that tells you what happens. You have to invent what happens next. And so his brother says this is a game of risk and imagination. And Grunkle Stan's reaction is risk. And Mabel says imagination. And then we get the perfect team up for the weirdest game ever. Eventually, this all culminates in death muffins, which are basically bombs that look like little muffins. And it's wonderful. And I love that when Mabel says to Grunkle Stan that he can just make stuff up, she doesn't just say like a story. She says it's just like lying, which is so excellent. That's exactly when it's like, Mabel, thank you. So Grunkle Stan's first spell is to cast the Shield of Shielding, which is wonderful. A Shield of Shielding reversal spell, and then the shield goes away. I cast Giggle Time Bouncy Boots, which basically they both are suddenly wearing these like weird moon shoes. Do you guys remember these from like Nickelodeon that had like the springs in them? I wanted these so bad as a kid. But they really do make them bounce super high in the air. She gives Dipper a flaming, super hot, flamey sword. I love the idea that this is based on her Cheetos that she was eating earlier, even though I don't think so. You'll never outrun my ogre-nado. It is what it sounds like. And then we see this tornado that is full of ogres, and it spins so fast that it puts out the flaming swords. And then Mabel, she casts, what is it that she calls it? Centaur Tor. That's right. And it's a centaur that's got another upside down horse body on the bottom. on the top. It is so terrifying. I hate it. I hate it. It's so awful. I do not like to look at it at all. And it rolls like it, because of it having feet on both sides, it can turn like in a full cartwheel, but keep running. It's awful. It's awful. It's awful. It does save their lives, but I hate it. The wall winds up interrupting the ogre NATO, and they all get, busted and fall all over the place and eventually like sort of disappear. But then all of a sudden, Ford and Dipper are scooped up by this weird flying creature. I was saving the worst for last. The Impossibeast. I thought they banned this character. Think again, I'm playing the controversial 1991 to 1992 edition. I love that. And the whole thing is supposed to be that this character is so difficult to beat that unless you roll a perfect 38, nothing you decide to do is going to work. And Grunkle Stan is like, oh, you have long odds that you're dealing with? Well, I happen to be a gambler. So you know what we're going to do? And he throws the dice, and it happens to land exactly on 38. And we find out later that there was maybe a little piece of gum stuck to the bottom of it that caused it to stop where it did. And it's a beautiful detail that Grunkle Stan did something to the dice. I love it. I loved it. I still love it. So yeah, I cast Death Muffins, and all of a sudden Dipper and Ford are holding exploding muffins whose fuses are lit, and it's wonderful. And there's a tiny little like mushroom cloud, and as they all as he explodes, the creature explodes, the wizard, oh my god, I forgot that Grenda has her arms wrapped around the hot elf. So good. As the wizard begins to disappear, he says, I'm returning to my own realm, and I'm turning into pure math. What are the odds? I hate and love that joke. I hate and love it. I'll just say. And I like that this episode ends with Grunkle Stan basically being like, you know what? I see the appeal of the game. It's super duper not for me, but I get why you like it, and it is perfect for the way that your mind works and the way my brother's mind works. And I really appreciated that, because like, that is just a fair way to code. There are things that, they're not for you, but you get it. And I am sort of Grunkle Stan in this situation. I get it. And I see that if you're playing the right people and you have the right attitude, that it could be so much fun. But I have not had that perfect storm happen to me. And even for Grunkle Stan, like, it's not even that. He wouldn't be interested in trying to figure out a perfect storm situation. But I appreciate that it leads to Dipper not feeling like he is being constantly mocked anymore. And they decide that they are going to go back to the house and watch the second showing of Ducktective. That the finale gets played twice in a row, which for a second I was like, what? And then I realized that they totally did that with like Game of Thrones. They would air the same episode one right after another if somebody missed the first showing of it. So yeah, that's absolutely a thing that could happen. And then we get another joke. Ducktective is on his deathbed, and his colleague, I just don't understand who shot you. The only person clever enough to defeat Ducktective is Ducktective. And then he gets hit on the head, and another duck walks into the room, and he's got a beard. And he says something about, I'm back, twin brother. And this is Mabel's response is, he had a twin brother all along. And Grenda says, what a ripoff. Seuss says, I predicted that like a year ago. I imagine that this is all shit that people said at the reveal of what was going on in the basement. I wasn't on these message boards. I have not done any of that because of how I cover this. But I assume that lots of people were probably saying, because these were such specific things to say that it just had the ring of, this is shit people have actually said. These are theories or reactions that people actually have. And that makes total sense to me. So yeah, I like when they comment on their own game or their own show in this way. And then we go back into the basement, and this is when Ford decides to open up to Dipper. Says, you asked me earlier what I was working on, and he shows him that he dismantled the portal. An interdimensional gateway is too dangerous for the world it feeds into. That's why I was mad at Stan for using it. He saved me, but as I feared, the instability of the machine created this. And he pulls out this little, it almost looks like one of those shakers that has snow in it. But inside is a tiny galaxy. And he says it's an interdimensional rift. I have it contained for now, but it's incredibly dangerous. Dipper, I don't want you to tell anyone about this. Not Stan, not even your sister. Do you understand? And he says, I've made many powerful enemies, but I trust you with this secret. And I'm like, who are your enemies? I want to know who else is out there. Who's after you, buddy? So yeah, he puts this thing away into a, what do you call it? Like a safe. It looks like a sort of a vault. And then we cut to credits and we get to see the dudes who are LARPing, and it's terrible. And there's a little monologue from the hayseed cop who says that maybe we're using this to fill an emptiness in our lives when really we should go out into the world and grow as people. And I'm like, you know what? Nah. I'm at a point in my life where I'm just just let people enjoy things. It's fine. Don't grow as people. It's just tiring and doesn't pay off. Just have a nice game and just go home. It's fine. So that is the end of the episode. And let me double check here when the next one is, because I think the next one, if I'm not mistaken, is live watch. Man, there are so many things on this spreadsheet. Why can't I find it? Oh, here it is. All right. So what's today? The 9th. So the next one is on the 3rd of June. And that's covering, season 3. I think that's a typo. Season 3, episode 14. Then the 10th will be covering 15 and 16. And then the 17th is a live watch. So the live watch won't be until the 12th of June. So we got a little while. All right, cool. Oh, Melanie says next to 6-3, not a live watch. Yeah, thank you. Or is that Melanie? But I don't know why. This thing will not show your names above every comment you make, and I don't know what that's about. Anyway, thank you guys very much for coming and hanging out with me, and thank you to Melanie for commissioning this episode. This is a really fun one, and thank you guys for warning me to watch it with Owen, because it definitely was better with him. So until next time, which will not be a live watch, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.